In this LEGO photography tutorial, we're getting up close and personal with LEGO minifigures. I want to get my camera and lens inside some LEGO buildings and take some photographs from the perspective and the scale of the LEGO minifigures. Stick around and we'll get started in just a sec. Hi guys, I'm Ben from Adaptalux and welcome back to another LEGO photography tutorial where today I'm expanding my LEGO photography skills and trying something new. I've done a lot of LEGO photography in the past and I'll link to some of those videos down in the description, but I've never quite been satisfied with my results. And I think that's down to a matter of perspective. I've never quite got the right perspective on my photographs. It always feels like I'm a giant looking down on tiny little things, and I think that is carried through to the viewer. I want to try and remedy that by getting my camera and lens down to the scale and perspective of another LEGO minifigure, like one minifigure taking a photograph of another as you or I would in real life. Now there's obviously going to be some challenges that come along with that, so I'm going to go through my process step by step. So the very first thing that I need is a LEGO building, a scene that we can place our minifigures into to make them look at home and to scale. I don't want to go for those types of LEGO photographs where you can quite clearly tell that everything around them is human scale and they're much smaller than they actually are. Today I'm aiming to make these guys look like they're in their own environment. Think LEGO movie where everything around them is made of LEGO and everything is properly to scale. To do that, I'm obviously going to be using some of my modular buildings which already have populated interiors in every single one of the rooms. These modular buildings are fantastic if you want to have a nice creative build with a lot of variety in the different rooms and different minifigures that come with it, and that is exactly what I need today. I want to get a few different shots of different minifigures going about their business in their homes and their businesses. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is place my camera down on a tripod and move my my LEGO set around so that I can get a good angle into one of these rooms. Now, of course, these rooms are pretty tiny. How am I going to get a full-size camera and lens into one of these really little rooms? Well, the answer is I've got a brand new lens, one that I've been very excited to try, and one that if you're into macro photography, you're probably familiar with. It's the Laowa probe lens. This thing is going to be instrumental to getting up close and personal with our LEGO minifigures. This will allow me to take photographs inside my buildings, pushing this thing in through a door or a window or just some removed bricks, and also getting the right perspective and focal length that a normal camera would have stood next to a minifigure. I'll explain more about that in just a moment, but first of all, I'm going to put this onto my camera and set up a little shot. So with the probe lens on the camera, we've got a really nice close-up shot of a baker in a bakery, but of course we're not actually that close because this is all the probe lens. It's really long and my camera is all the way back over here, but it's reaching forward and looking in through the doorway of the bakery, and that's giving us a really fantastic view into this room and into my minifigure. You can see the front of the probe lens there sat in the doorway at about the same height and angle as a minifigure would be stood in the doorway looking at this scene. I've set up this minifigure so that she's reaching forward with a paddle, and I'll put a little treat on the end there, I think. So it looks like you're reaching forward towards the viewer. Now there's one really interesting and unique aspect about this lens, and that's its viewing angle. It's a 24mm lens, so it's actually really wide angle, and it's getting a nice wide view of the inside of this room from a tiny little perspective. Just that tiny little objective at the end there is giving us a really wide angle angle and a very close-up angle. So all of the depth in the room is going to be accentuated by the distortion of the wider angle lens, the 24mm lens, and it's going to look like you're actually stood there in the door viewing this scene. Anything that's close is going to be really close, anything that's off to the sides and to the back will look like it's much further away. So that's a really interesting aspect to this lens that aids us in making this scene look a lot more believable. Of course, it's really handy to be able to stick the long probe through the doorway as well, and we'll be doing the same with some of these other rooms. We've got a flower shop here, and I think I'll do a scene in there. We've got a ballerina up in this room, but something that you'll notice with all of this is that it's really dark in all of these rooms. Even though it's quite light out here in the wider scene, it's really dark as soon as you get 4 walls up around a shot. So we're going to need some lighting, and that's where some creative placement of lights is going to be really important. The problem with the scale of our photography equipment is not exclusive to our camera and our lens. Our lighting is also going to need to be to scale to fit into this tiny little complicated scene that we've got going on. There's a lot of light sources in the room around you. Take a look around. There's going to be windows, there's going to be lamps, lights, the screen that you're watching this on. It all creates a little bit of light. And if you simply light from a single direction in a scene like this, it's not going to look believable like it's a real room. You want light coming in through the windows, you want light bouncing off the different surfaces and coming from a few different directions to make it look like this is a living and breathing environment. The way that I'm going to do that is by introducing light from the Adaptalux Studio. In the same way that our probe lens can get into tiny spaces and be scaled to the environment, the Adaptalux Studio flexible lighting arms can also get into those tiny little spaces and be scaled to the environment. I'm going to plug in a few lighting arms into the control pod, and I can bend them around to place light exactly where it needs to be in this scene. Now, because they're continuous lights and on all of the time, it makes it really easy to experiment with the directions that your light is coming from. That's critical in a shot like this, where you really need to fine-tune exactly where all of the light is falling to make it as believable as possible. Let's go back to our baker and see where the light needs to come from to make this look a little bit more realistic. So things have changed a little bit in my bakery scene. First of all, you'll see that my settings have improved a little bit, but we'll talk more about settings in just a moment. More importantly, we have a lot more light in our bakery scene. We can actually look down in here now and see the front of that probe lens and how close it is to our baker. Now there's a few different lights going on here, and I'll talk you through why I've placed them in the places that they're at. So the most important one here is this lighting arm just here, which is lighting the front of our baker and the face on the front of the minifigure. It's really important to get some nice even lighting on the front of your character so that you're not casting strange shadows and they do look quite pleasant. Over in the back corner, I've placed a white lighting arm with a pink diffuser on it. That's just because I want a nice, warm, interesting color in this corner of the room. I maybe think there's a neon light over here or something, casting a little bit of interesting colored light into the room. Now the second most important light, I think, is this one back here. It's pointing through this door at the back here and casting a nice bright highlight on that back wall. Now I think this is emulating some morning sunshine or something like that. Perhaps it's the evening and the baker is just finishing up, but it casts a realistic looking highlight on the back wall. Now that's a really important feature in this shot, because that back wall is actually quite plain and boring, but with some extra light it's going to look a lot more realistic. I think at this point a lot of people will have the same question, and that is simply, how did you know where to place those lights to make this scene look believable? And honestly, the answer is, I've got no idea. Until you start placing your scene, your minifigures and your lighting, it really is anybody's guess as to what is going to look right. You really have to get your camera in position and start to build your scene around the viewpoint that you've made for yourself, and that includes your lighting. With a nice flexible lighting system, a continuous light like this, you can move your light around and try out different angles, different amounts of diffusion, different colors, different brightnesses, all to build up the scene piece by piece. So there is a lot of trial and error in creating a scene like this, and honestly I've tried and I've had many errors in taking some scenes inside these Lego buildings. Pretty much every shot that I've taken, I've then come back to, tweaked a few more things and tried again and again and again. And you can actually see the improvement that my images have had from my very first attempt all the way through to my final image that I'm actually happy with. I'm just coming back to this scene to give you an example as to why we're not using the built-in LEDs at the end of the Laowa probe lens. You can see that I've got it plugged in there to my extension cord, and it is creating quite a lot of light. It is illuminating the inside of the bakery quite nicely. However, the direction of light, the intensity, the direct nature of the LEDs is creating a really quite ugly scene. Everything close to the lens is overexposed, everything far away is too underexposed, and it's also creating some nasty reflections on the shiny Lego bricks. It's similar to recommending that a portrait photographer use the built-in flash, direct flash on their camera. It's just not going to happen. The results are not going to look right, and it's far better to create your light using some external lighting than try to rely on the built-in LEDs on this lens. I'm sure they're great for some other types of shoots, but for this application they're really not suitable. Another super important consideration for Lego photography is depth of field. Sometimes I talk about depth of field in macro photography as being a problem that we need to overcome. Sometimes it's an asset because it makes your images look nice and soft and a little bit ethereal. When it comes to Lego photography, it's really down to what you want from your image. This probe lens has a very, very shallow depth of field, and we can't really affect it too much because we need all of our aperture to let as much light in as possible. So we're shooting at f14 pretty much all of the time. What we can do though is decide whether or not we want our images to be completely blurry in the background and the foreground, or we can focus stack a little bit to combat our depth of field. Take our baker for instance. She's holding out a delicious treat really, really close to the end of the lens. Now if I weren't to focus stack that image, the treat on the end of her little stick there would be completely out of focus, and I think that would take away from the image. So I've focus stacked from her face forward to the end of the lens. This is allowing me to keep some of my image in focus and allow the background to fall out of focus nicely and softly to make that scale still seem like it's Lego scale. Conversely, with my flower shop girl, I didn't want any of my foreground or background to be in focus at all, so I simply took a single image, and the background and foreground drops off really, really suddenly, leaving a very, very shallow depth of field and a blurry foreground and background. I think that adds to the nice morning feeling of all of that light shining in through the windows, and it makes everything feel a little bit more believable and to scale. I've got a little bit carried away with my Lego photography today. I've taken some shots of a dentist worrying his patient. I've got some shots of a flower girl and a ballerina. All of them were taken in a very similar way to our baker by placing our lens inside the room with the minifigures. Some had to have walls or windows or doors removed in order to allow the lens in at the correct angle, but it's Lego. You can take it apart and you can put it back together again. I know I've glossed over some of the intricacies of this probe lens a little bit, but this isn't a review video. There are plenty of review videos out there for probe lenses, the Laowa or otherwise. I am very thankful for Laowa sending over this probe lens, and this is not going to be the last thing that I use it for. It really does open up a huge world of possibilities, not only for Lego photography, but also for macro photography in general. I would just like to give a shout out to the inspiration for this particular style of Lego photography. I've been learning from Anna at 4 Bricks Tall. She's a dedicated Lego photographer and a Lego brand ambassador, so she's very, very good at Lego photography. I've been watching some of her videos, and it just so happens that as I was watching her latest video using a probe lens, my probe lens turned up and I thought I'd give it a go. Now I'm not quite as good at this as Anna is, but Anna does have an Adaptalux studio and she's going to be making some content using it in the near future. So do make sure to head over to Anna's channel and hit subscribe so that you can see what she can do with our lighting. I'll put a link to Anna's channel, 4 Bricks Tall, down in the description. Now I say this most of the time that I'm happy with the images that I've taken, but I'm actually really happy with the Lego photos that I've taken. This probe lens is a little bit revolutionary for this kind of shot, and getting the lighting into the exact right place for that final shot is extremely satisfying. So I'm very happy with the shots that I've taken, and I want to know from you guys what you think to this method, to the probe lens, to the lighting, and to my final images. Make sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed all of this, and hit the subscribe button for lots more macro photography tutorials, ideas, and inspiration coming in the future. For now, that is all I've got time for. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.